Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councillor Peter Candlish, Cabinet Member for Transport, and I'm just about to start this Transport Decision meeting. I will apologise for any errors of process, protocol, good behaviour or politeness that occur in the next hour or so, as this is my first time in the big chair, and I may well make some small errors, but I look out and I see a reasonably forgiving audience, so I hope that position continues. There are some housekeeping and safety information I have to give out. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Don't use the lifts, and assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. And if everyone can use the microphones, and remember to switch them off when you have finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. Very fortunately, the microphones are super simple to use. They are on, the red light is showing. They are off, the light is not showing. Okay, with that, I'd like to do some introductions and just briefly go around the room, if we may. Not just the people attending the committee, but also those people making a presentation or a deputation, so that I know who you are and where you are. So I will start with myself. I'm Councillor Peter Candlish, and I'm chairing this meeting. Graham.
I'm Councillor Graham Heaney. I'm the Labour Group spokesman for Transport.
Jason, could you start your row?
Sorry. Jason Benjamin, Portsmouth City Council Parking Manager.
Fantastic. And if you now just turn it off, perfect.
Barbara Thomas, TRO Team Lead.
Tracy Shepherd, I'm from the Road Safety and Active Travel team.
Councillor Brian Madrick for Portsgrove Ward, and I'm also on this panel with Graham and yourself.
Felicity Tibbury, Assistant Director for Transport.
Paul Walker, National Bus Strategy Delivery Manager.
Hayley Chivers, Transport Planning Manager.
Gemma White, Transport Strategy Team Leader for EV.
Alison Harrison, owner-occupier of 2 Langston Road.
Michael Harrison, also owner-occupier of 2 Langston Road, Portsmouth.
Okay, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I've now got a couple of formal items on the agenda. So firstly, apologies for this meeting have been received from Councillor Simon Bosher, and I don't think there's anyone else who needs to or has given an apology. Felicity.
Thank you. There's also an apology from Stanley Palmer, who is meant to be presenting item 5. Tracy Shepherd has kindly stepped in. Thank you.
Fantastic, and I'm sure Tracy will be as well when we come to that moment. So now we're going to come, now we have any declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything of major interest that they need to declare that might affect how we should interpret what they say and do? No? In that case, we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the TRO PO 34-24 for Langston Road, disabled persons parking place. And if I could ask Denise to give an initial quick presentation on this. I'm sorry, that is of course Jason. My mistake, Jason. You are definitely not Denise.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we'll be presenting the paper on Denise's behalf. The purpose of the paper is considered a public response to the proposed disabled bay in Langston Road in Portsmouth. We had an application to put in a disabled parking bay in Langston Road. The applicant lives in Milton Road, but it's not possible to put a disabled bay on Milton Road. The closest and safest location for disabled bay is on the south side of Langston Road, and from our assessments we've proposed a disabled bay to be located halfway across number 2 Langston Road, as shown on the map in Appendix D of the report. We have advertised the traffic regulation order, and we've had an objection which is noted in the, stated in the report, and I believe the objector, Alison Howson, is here today to give a deputation to those means. Our proposal, as I said, is to put a disabled bay outside or halfway across number 2 Langston Road. The objectors have clearly stated in their written submission why they object. And as I said, they're here to state their case again. It is our recommendation that the bay is as proposed and outlined in Appendix D.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move to hear the deputation. So, Ms Harrison, if you'd like to speak. Officially, there are 12 minutes for deputations, and if there are a couple of you speaking, that's 6 minutes each, unless you've agreed amongst yourselves that you want to split it in some different way. There is also, of course, no obligation to use the whole 12 minutes, but we absolutely want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to raise initially that this parking bay was put in directly outside this residence of Milton Road, her back door, which is at the closer to the top end of Langston Road. It says it was initially advertised in September 23. It wasn't advertised on Langston Road. It may well have been advertised on Milton Road, where they were initially thinking of putting it. It's quite obvious if you looked on Google Maps you couldn't put it where this lady rents. It was then put on Langston Road. There was nothing on the lamppost to indicate that that was going to happen. It was then removed, and then the next thing we knew, the double yellow lines, the bus stop was removed, the markings, and the double yellow lines were extended. Again, there was nothing on our lamppost to say this was going to happen. The only notification we'd seen was that work was going to be carried out on this particular day and cars needed to be removed between these times. Given that, our yellow lines now are approximately 30 metres on the south side from the top down to where they stop, and approximately 23 metres on the north side to where they stop. There is a bay on the north side, which I understand is not ideal for a disabled person, even though it's closer to where her back door is. She'd have to cross the road. I understand all that. She does park there frequently when she can, bless her. My main concern and argument against this is it is going to affect us because it is halfway across our frontage. I also am concerned we're not getting any younger, we're in our 60s. So if I need, or my husband needs, a disabled parking bay, we're not going to be able to have it in the place we own, which is really concerning. Furthermore, if they had looked at the TRO that was in force for the double yellows, which would have come in place, I would assume, after the initial application for the disabled bay in September 23, all they needed to do was shorten those yellow lines by 3 metres, and this lady could have had her disabled bay alongside the wall of the house she rents, and it wouldn't affect us in the slightest. They also, on top of that, if with the traffic flow, which I understand is a problem on Langston Road, could have then extended by 3 metres on the north side to accommodate making the traffic flow exactly the same as it as it is at the moment, with no effect. So the fact that none of this was taken into consideration, and yet you state, you know, it has to be reasonable access for residents on that road, it wouldn't be reasonable access for me. We're already a busy road with problems parking. We have to contend with hospital workers parking there. We have to contend with people on Baffins Road not paying permits and parking on our road and walking round. This is only going to exacerbate everything. And in my opinion, there's absolutely no need. If somebody had just looked at this and said, oh, hold on, we've a TRO in for double yellows, but we also have to put this disabled bay that the lady has been waiting for since last year, and it's now 10 months later. This could have been rectified, in my opinion, quite simply by better communication and diligence when all of this came about. And as they seem to come from the same place or maybe slightly different departments, I'm not sure how it got missed. It was errored in the first place by the initial bay going in the wrong place, and we having no notification that double yellows were going to be reinstated. I couldn't oppose to ask to have them shortened to allow for this disabled bay to go in. I'd like to further add that the lady who has requested the disabled bay knocked my door and has also asked me to oppose it, as she doesn't want it outside our house. So they're probably my main arguments on this, that it will impact us, and not only at the moment, but going forward as we get older. And I think for the sake of 3 metres and another TRO going in place to do so, and there would have been none of this would have needed to have continued so long, and I wouldn't have needed to come here, my husband wouldn't, and the lady would have had her disabled bay, which she's currently doesn't have. And, you know, to say that there's a duty for the disabled person and yet quite happily have gone along for 10 months now, because nobody can seem, in my opinion, to see reasonable sense in just 3 metres is all it would take for that bay to go in, and it wouldn't affect us. She will be closer to her door, and that would be the end of it. And there's the double yellows, as I say, are currently 30 metres on our road on that south side. So yeah, I think it could have been dealt with quicker. I think it should have been dealt with quicker. I think the notices should have gone up so we could have opposed the reinstatement of the yellow lines for that 3 metres. None of that was done. And so we're left sitting here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And sir, you have a deputation to make as well, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to reinforce everything that Alison has said. I think she's covered absolutely everything, and I don't need to go over all that again. I just hope that common sense can prevail and that the matter can be solutioned by the removal of 3 metres of the double yellow lines. This would allow the disabled bay to be put in a position that isn't outside our property. And I suppose, as Alison said, if that had happened in the first place, we wouldn't be here talking about it. I'm not against, obviously, the lady would need a disabled bay, but it could be done with a more common sense approach. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much. If I now turn to my fellow members of the committee. Bram. Okay. Councillor Madgwick.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm not a driver nowadays, haven't been for 17 years, because basically I'm disabled, but I can walk a certain distance. I have a special chair and even in the council here. But 2 or 3 things about disabled. As far as I know and am aware of, if you want that bay yourself, later on you just take it, because the disabled bay isn't actually given to the person who's disabled. Anybody with a blue badge can park there, simple as that. So you haven't lost that space if you don't want to. Yes, somebody else could use it, but somebody else could use it anytime, any day, anywhere, any when, whether you've got it or not. So, so you haven't lost it. But I do understand, I wouldn't particularly like somebody else's disabled parking area in front of my house because you bought and paid for it, and you bought and paid for it without a disabled bay being put in there. Also, are we sure that those yellow lines can't be shortened? Because that seems a hell of a distance. I understand they don't want lorries parked there by the junction and things like that, but couldn't they be shortened just for that, 2-3 metres? Thank you.
Well, that was the question that I was going to ask about the lines. I mean, we seem to have not got the full context in the written report. Obviously, there's a bit of history prior to that, which the two people giving deputation have set out. So, obviously, your lines were put in at some point. I presume they were put in before the request for a disabled way was made. So the question is, what was the reasoning for the lines? And given that I know that junction is very busy, because obviously at rush hour it is busy, was there any consideration given to extending the lines on the other side for a similar reason? So I'm really sort of asking the same question that Councillor Madrick is about whether the lines needed to be extended and whether that might provide a solution. Because you wouldn't necessarily have to take that much, because in order to get a bay, you would only have to take, because if the photograph shows a garage or a store which doesn't appear to be used but has no drop curb, so it wouldn't be used like that. So even by taking some of the lower lines, you could avoid taking another space there. So that's my question, really.
I would have been coming on something similar, but I think there were 2 points that I wanted to make here. So, firstly, it is clear that this issue has taken some time to come to it, and not everything was perfect in the process. I think while we have to just accept that and say we are where we are now, let's try and move this forward. The second thing is, I was also going to say that yes, your concern over the disability space per se is not something that directly in the future that we can consider, because like anyone in the city, you don't have an automatic right to have something outside of your home. And should you require a disability parking space, you would and were able to qualify for it through the usual protocols. In principle, there could be a second space there. But as the councillor has already said, in practice, both of those could be occupied if other disabled people came to choose to use it. So I have to say we put those thoughts to the side. And I think the focus of this decision is really around what the possibilities are for modifying the existing lines that we've got. So if I could ask Jason perhaps to give a little bit more colour about that specifically, because I think that's where the decision turns.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to defer that question to my colleague, Barbara, who works in the Traffic Regulation Orders team, who will be able to provide more information.
Okay, thanks, Jason. As I understand it, so just new to this one today, so I've just been sort of picking up the sort of the backstory for it. As I understand it, there was a bus stop in Langston Road. There's no longer a bus service, and the bus stop has recently been removed. The yellow lines, or the order for the yellow lines, existed essentially underneath the bus stop, so there was no material change to the residents. The yellow lines were basically just essentially replacing the bus stop, but you couldn't park on the bus stop. You can't park on the yellow lines. Furthermore, the network manager has advised that the length of the yellow lines has been decided at that particular length in order to allow for queuing traffic at a busy junction, and he feels that any reduction in that length would lead to further congestion, and that's why the disabled bay was proposed at the end of the yellow lines rather than looking at reducing them. If the decision is that you would want that to be reviewed, then we would need to re-advertise that disabled bay, and that of course takes time with a 21-day objection period, and any objections would need to be reported to a future meeting like this one. So of course that would lead to another delay in this resident being able to use a disabled bay. Yeah, beyond that, is that enough information? Was there anything else?
I think that's enough. I mean, at the end of the day, the question is turning on, do we need the 30 metres length, or could we get away with 27 to fix the problem here? If I just ask the people providing the deputation, two points of clarification. So the issue really here, so in terms of the access to the garage doesn't look like it's regularly used, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's part of the rented property.
Okay.
So that whole side is part of the lady's rented property. And when she knocked my door, she said she'd spoken to her landlord, who said he was quite prepared for her to have a disabled bay across on up from, you know, from the garage up the way. So that is all part of hers. So with regards objections, the only objections were because it's halfway across our property. So there wouldn't be any further delay in that. And also, I think we should also remember there is 23 metres of yellow lines on the north side, and currently a space for parking. But if you needed to, then if you were taking 3 metres from the south side, you could extend, because it's over 5 metres, the space that's there, you could extend a further 3 metres, and the traffic flow would be exactly the same as it is now by taking one away and moving one on the other side by 3 metres. So you would have no change in traffic flow at that top end.
Thank you. And then the second thing, I understood that you have spoken directly from your deputation. You spoke directly to the person who's looking for the site. Could you just repeat what or amplify what you said on that?
Yes, she knocked my door and said, listen, I'm the one that's applied for this disabled bay. I said, yes, I'm aware of that. I'd really like you to oppose it. I don't want it outside the front of your house. And I said, I will be opposing it. And she went, okay, that's great, thanks.
Okay, so unless there's any more information in this, I'm kind of prepared to make a decision about where I think we ought to go. And I see no takers for...
Just
Sorry,
have we had any comments from the local ward councillors? Because one of the problems about these issues is that I represent St Jude ward, which is my ward, but obviously I don't know the detail of every single other part of the city. So we often rely on whether ward councillors have actually made any representations on them. And to be honest, my line is, if the ward councillors are happy, you know, it's not for me to then suddenly say, oh, you know, I disagree with you. So I don't know whether we had any comments from the ward councillors, or maybe their silence is that they feel happy about it. I don't know. That's the only other thing. And of course, the other thing is that we don't, although I'm here as the Labour Group spokesperson, I don't actually have a vote in this decision. It's not my decision, it's the Cabinet members' decision, which may be a bit unusual if you've never been to one of these meetings before. We are here, but we can comment on, but we can't actually vote to change a decision of any sort. So that clarification was helpful.
I'm not aware of there being any specific comments from ward councillors about this.
Chair, when we normally advertise a TRO, I think ward members are notified through the process, and they get an opportunity to object or feedback with any comments. Obviously, this bay is proposed outside, halfway outside number 2. Mrs Harrison would like it moved further, which would result in a new TRO, which would then, that information would then be sent to ward members to comment on, but that would be a new process to take forward.
Okay, so I think my decision will be, it seems to me that there is a reasonable compromise to be made here, that it was a almost default decision to extend the traffic lines as they are. We have both, if you like, the person who is making the deputation and also the person who is involved who are happy with the solution. The only issues are that we will create the need to do an additional TRO, and that there will be a delay in sorting that out as a process, which will lead to time, and then there will be a time to do a relining, because we will not be doing a relining exercise solely for this. It will get grouped in with other activities. But I would like to say that we will listen to the deputation and make the adjustment as described. And therefore, we will prepare a new TRO to that effect.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm now going to move to item 4 on the agenda, Rainbow Corner Nursery Phase 2, Speed Hump Consultation. And for that, I think we are turning to Tracy.
Thank you, Councillor. So the purpose of the report is to consider the responses that we've received in relation to the speed hump notice, which was proposed for the installation of the speed humps in the vicinity of Rainbow Corner Nursery in Victoria Road. Due to the number of incidents in the area, the proposed measures are to be implemented to assist in reducing the risk of injury to pedestrians travelling in the area and also children that attend the nursery. The speed hump consultation was carried out within February of this year and it came to a close on the 18th of March. In response to the speed hump notice, we had 13 replies, and of those 13, 7 were in support of the proposals and 6 were objecting. A summary of these responses can be found in Appendix C of the report, along with the reasons given in support and objection from those who have raised those. And there is also responses and comments from PCC officers in response to those comments made by those objecting and supporting.
Thank you very much. I think there are no deputations in the hall for this one. So do my fellow councillors have any particular things to say on this one?
Just briefly, that I have had a discussion with one of my colleagues, Councillor Gerarda. She's very happy with this as a warm councillor. And obviously I've seen this issue develop over a period of time, and so I think it's a welcome initiative to try and improve safety on the road and reduce speed. Having said that, I do actually use that crossing quite often when I'm returning from football going to see a friend of mine. The number of occasions I've had vehicles not stopping when you put your foot on the crossing, so having a raised hump I think will hopefully deter vehicles from doing that. So yeah, I'm in support of this.
I think this is going to be a very easy one. I'm also have seen for myself some of the safety issues along this road. There are issues raised. I think they have been addressed reasonably, and the consequences for the road network are acceptable, and therefore we should accept the recommendation and do it. My apologies to the officers if there are phraseologies I should be doing around how we say these things, but I think the intent is clear. Okay, if we can now move to number 6 on the agenda. This is the Portsmouth EV electric vehicle infrastructure strategy. And I beg your pardon, thank you. I was just testing to see whether people were awake in the audience. Fortunately, there are more people awake than are sitting in the chair. So item number 5, TRO 296/2023 Edenbridge Road. And for that, we are going to have... Take it away, Tracy.
Thank you. So the purpose of the report is to consider the responses received in relation to the proposed extension of the double yellow lines on Edenbridge Road at the junction of Warren Avenue. Residents and councillors have raised concerns regarding the difficulties experienced for pedestrians when crossing Edenbridge Road. With the development of the St James's Hospital site, it's anticipated that the number of pedestrians navigating the junction will increase, and we need to consider as well that it also provides access to Moorings Way Infant School. There are proposals to implement in the very near future a pedestrian refuge at the junction to assist with improving pedestrian movements. The extension of the double yellow lines would facilitate this while still providing safe access for service vehicles such as refuse vehicles within the area. In response to the consultation, 4 objections were received. 1 objection did not relate to the TRO. 2 suggested that the current usage within the area of pedestrians is too low to justify the proposed pedestrian refuge, and one related to concerns of displaced work vehicles in the area relating to the St James's development.
So for those watching you closely, I've also been ignoring my own advice about leaving the red light on, for which I apologise. However, it is back to me to ask my colleagues here, have they got any concerns or issues they want to raise on this one?
Only to the fact that these sort of things I believe should go to ward councillors, and they should be obviously informed, and which I presume they are, and almost make decisions for us there, because they're on site, they know it's their residents, etc. I'm all for the safety of double yellow lines, but as a city, we know we can't afford to lose parking spaces. So I think both those obviously have to be considered. But as I say, I wouldn't like to make the decision. I think it should be ward councillors should actually put recommendations into yourself, Chair. Thank you.
So let's ask the question about that. Were there any comments or statements from the ward councillors?
As I understand, the ward councillors were consulted on this. I'd have to look to Barbara to see if she could advise me if there was any comments raised by the ward councillors in relation to this TRO.
As Tracy said, they were consulted. That's part of our sort of statutory consultation process, and we didn't receive any comments from any of the ward councillors.
It is actually an interesting thought, actually, whether we should have a positive a line within these reports to indicate whether they were advised and whether anything came back, because otherwise we will consistently be asking this question. But we are where we are. Councillor Heaney?
Again, locally, sure, I'm very happy if the ward councillors are happy. I think I assume that because we're quite busy and people very often sort of don't reply if there's no problem, as that tends to be my role anyway, is if I don't have anything to say, because I think it's okay, I won't necessarily write an email to say that. So I think that does tend to work quite well. And as long as members are aware of that, and I'm sure most members are, that may be something new members have to be made aware of, that if they do have issues, they need to raise them, not just assume that they'll get picked up in some other way. But that's a good point. But yeah, I think if we can try and avoid, creating more paperwork and emails, then that would be quite a good idea.
My sense on this one was to go forward with it. There are issues about putting more double yellow lines in, and there are parts of the city where parking is a real issue, and that would be a major consideration. This actually isn't one of those, certainly at the moment, and also the considerations about whether there is a demand now. There is certainly going to be a demand in the future, so I think this is a bit of a future-proofing decision that we're making. So I'm happy to go with the recommendations as put forward. It is time now for item number 6, the Portsmouth Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Strategy, and I would like to ask Gemma to take us through this, please.
Thank you, Councillor. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the results of the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Strategy consultation and to recommend that we adopt the final version of the Portsmouth EVI strategy as a supplementary document of the Portsmouth Transport Strategy, or LTP4. So the EV strategy demonstrates the ambition for future delivery plans and how we will meet demand from residents, workers, visitors and businesses in the city. These demands will be met via the 4 objectives, which focus on residents, workers and visitors, fleet and public transport. We ran a 6-week public consultation between September 18th and 29th of October 2023. That ran alongside the parking strategy. The consultation was promoted via digital means and in person through events. We had 485 survey responses, 90% of which were from Portsmouth residents, which we consider to be a fairly good representation from all age groups over the age of 25. Overall, the results from that indicated a generally high level of overall agreement with the draft objectives and policies across a broad section of age groups, genders and parts of the city. So the reason for the recommendations is that the adoption of an EVI strategy supports delivery of the Portsmouth Transport Strategy, specifically Policy B. This strategy also supports the government strategy and the ZEV mandate. Having an adopted electric vehicle infrastructure strategy will set in place a range of policies to support and guide future decision-making related to matters of importance to the city and its residents. One of the criteria for being awarded capability funding was to enable us to create an EVI strategy, with the intention that that strategy would set us up to deliver the Levi capital allocation outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think on this one, the key we need to think about is that this is an EV strategy for the future. We're looking forward about where we need to go. I think we're all aware that Portsmouth has gone through some difficult issues lately with the public charging network, and perhaps unfortunately there are some confidentiality reasons that prevent me providing too much more information about some of the background on that. But as an early adopter of the technology relative to the rest of the country, perhaps some of them should have been some issues should have been expected, and they have certainly materialised in the last little while. However, this is our strategy for the future, and I would like to ask my colleagues if they have any inputs to give around that. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, I have some questions actually, and I will not talk about the current situation. I'll save that to the next report where it is discussed. The strategy talks about continuing to deliver on-street charge point schemes, and it talks about installing individual parking bays. Now, as that begins to increase, there is clearly a potential for conflict between people wishing to park and EV bays, which have to be kept available. So I'm wondering how we're going to deal with that. Are we going to install more EV bays where the demand is, or are we going to make some decisions about, well, there are actually enough bays to cover the potential vehicles, and what sort of calculation we do for that, rather than just responding to lots of people in one area wanting EV charging bays. So I just wonder how we're going to manage that, because there's going to be some potential conflict. That's my first question. I'll leave that and I'll come on to the others in a minute, if I may.
So if I give a quick answer to that, and I'm happy if if the officers want to amplify the answer that I give. So I think one of the good things that we're starting to see with this strategy is that the overall footprint of places is getting to the point where more and more people should be within reasonably close contact of them. And the numbers are also increasing to the point where we are, from responding to the early pioneers who we hope to find out there and we're able to kind of build to their demand, we're actually moving to a more systematic way of rolling them out to make sure everyone is covered. However, within that, we are still soliciting for people to advise where they will be having EV requirements, and that yeah, so we're taking the solicitation of where we are getting specific requests, leading us to have information, and we also have some good indications looking the other way about where we would expect demand to be. So I think the answer to your question is it will, as it is, it will move to a more systematic basis, but will still be predominantly demand-led. But we should be making sure that no part of the city is left blank. There should be no parts which are too far away. I think the other thing that we need to think about is how the technology is evolving very fast, and it may be that new solutions and new balances will have to come in ways that are difficult to predict at the moment. So we have a broad strategy about how we're going forward, and I think the council is going to have to respond on a reasonably agile basis to what actually transpires.
Thank you. Policy E talks about supporting businesses to provide e-charging and then accessing charge point provision, and talking about the public being able to access these. I can understand why that might be useful, but it isn't going to be universal, because some premises and some businesses may not feel able to make that available. to them. So do we have any specific things? I mean, what the businesses I would think that could be encouraged to put more charging points in would be supermarkets who've got big car parks. And I've said this before, so it's not the first time I've said this, that we can encourage them to do that, that would be good. And related to that, there is policy I, which talks about to work with fleet operators to understand the needs of electric fleet vehicles are registered to work as residences. Now, obviously, an EV charging point isn't available for a specific vehicle or a specific person. So I'm not quite sure how we will do that, because we can't basically say that we can put a point near where they live, but it can't guarantee they'll be available. So I'm just wondering, you know, whether we have any issues with how that will work, because you would hope that the business would make sure vehicles were charged up on site before they actually went off anywhere, but that's a question there. So yeah, the other question I had is about the providing the business support.
So, sorry, I failed to. There were three questions you put down there. The first one was around the supporting the getting major businesses essentially to provide support, and I think there what I would hope we are going to do is be in constant contact with them and pushing them to be able to do that. And I think you raised the issue of supermarkets. I think there are also other public places where we should be thinking about that. I see schools as a potential place. There are issues that are involved in making that happen, but they have the combination of car parking spaces and potentially some quieter times when there are not children around, which may enable them to do it in part. Because I think we're going to have many, many different solutions to take this forward. On the second question, I failed to make my notes clearly enough, so I'd appreciate if you give me a brief resume, and I think I might be directing this one to the officers to give some more colour if that's possible. It was around the individual usage.
How we contact registered workers, because we can't give them a specific space, and how we're going to manage that.
Hayley, I can see you moving to a microphone.
So I think it's about working with fleets and with businesses to understand, do their staff have company vehicles that they are bringing home at night? And then if that is the case, they would be treated much like residents and the resident scheme. But I think it's understanding that demand that's coming from fleets and businesses that don't have parking and charging at their depots. Wherever possible, obviously we would encourage them to have that charging on site, but for some companies that isn't possible and the vehicles do come home. So it's just working with them and understanding it to start with, and working with them to understand what the solution is.
And if I add to that a little bit, the note that I was making to myself was, I think this is one of those examples where we are going to have to monitor how it actually works in practice, and we already are starting to see issues that are going to arise around parking and people using EV parking spaces not as an EV charging space, but as an auxiliary parking space available to them because they have a parking car. Because they have an electric vehicle which they need to park. So I think there will be some, I think it's a really good point to raise, that we need to keep an eye on how this develops, and there will be implications for what we do for monitoring usage and behaviours to ensure that there is fair access for everyone to get their chance to use it, and that we are not providing an infrastructure that is solely for businesses who can find other ways of doing it. Quite exactly how that will work in practice, I think, ask me in 2 years. Councillor Madgwick.
Idle curiosity and a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Have we got charging points in the underground car park at the civic offices?
I can assure that we do, because
I don't use them, so
I don't. I'm mostly on a bicycle, or I'm in an old-fashioned 10-year-old ice car. However, I do see council vehicles being charged below. But I think it's interesting that it's a good question to ask, because there are also issues about making people aware of where these resources are and how they should be using them. Anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to accept the report, thank the authors for preparing it, and look forward to this as an issue growing in importance over the next few years. Okay, that's that one done. Thank you. Item number 7, on-street residential charge point scheme, phase 3. Gemma, I believe we're back to you.
You are back to me. Thank you, Councillor. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for Portsmouth City Council to go to tender with a revised route to the market for the third phase of on-street residential charge points, also referred to as AUX. So, as covered in the report that proposed an approach to procurement which was approved in March, we now have changed our approach to reflect that Oxford DPS is no longer an available option to us. So the Council intends to run a procurement process in accordance with the Concession Contracts Regulations 2016, which will enable procurement to go ahead within the timescale set by the funding body, thus enabling us to go to delivery for phase 3. Due to the grant conditions requiring all charging infrastructure to be installed and operational by the end of March 2025, an efficient phased approach is required for the scheme's successful delivery. The important thing is that the contract proposed will still be a concession contract, whereby the repair and maintenance will be the financial and operational responsibility of the operator. That is based on many lessons that we have learned from previous contracts. So due to the funding requirements specifying March 2025 as a delivery date for this phase of AUX, it is essential that the work detailed in this report is enabled to be conducted as expediently as possible by the relevant qualified officers. Further delay to the programme would be a substantial threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And yes, that's certainly one of the issues that is top of my mind, that we have, in principle, we have cash that we have available to spend on Portsmouth that we could be in danger of losing if we delay on this one. So I'm definitely minded to find some quick decisions here. I think it is a little bit unfortunate that the process through which this was going has been disruptive, and I'm optimistic that the new government will provide perhaps a more stable framework around some of these issues that will be helpful to us going forward. But we have to play the hand that we have in front of us at the moment. So, as I've asked before, do either of the other councillors here on this committee have anything that they wish to add to where we are on this report? Councillor Madgwick is indicating no. Councillor Heaney, the floor is yours.
I'm afraid I do, yes. I wanted to ask some questions about the timescale for implementation, because obviously it's pretty short. We're talking about providing potentially 320 sites for parking bays, which have to be identified and then consulted on, and we're talking about TROs. Now, I would imagine, as someone who has nothing to do with this, is that a TRO for a bay like this is relatively straightforward. You could have a template, if you like, and just fill in the location and do them. But there is quite a bit of work involved in that. And if we start getting objections, because as I think I indicated earlier, there is potential for people to start objecting to these on the basis that it will take parking spaces. Are we confident we have the resources to be able to do this in terms of preparing the orders, doing the consultation and responding?
So if I may take the Chair's liberty of answering that in top line and in short, and then ask possibly the officers to amplify. So I think the honest answer is time is very, very tight around this. And the good news is that some work has already been done to start this process. It is a template, but this is a lot of TROs, a lot of consultation, and we all know that resources are not infinite around these. I think there is also a belief that although it is not there in writing, that there is a reasonable possibility that should we be making very good progress on a good scheme and doing it well, that there might be a little bit of wiggle room around the timing, although that isn't possible to be confirmed at the moment. And I note that there is some discussion as to how the work is being done, which is being done in a way to expedite the rollout of these. But I think the honest truth is timing is tight as a drum, and there is a risk. There is definitely a risk within this. Could I ask for some support from an officer on this to provide any more context to what I've said there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of resourcing, we do have Levi capability funding, which has managed to strengthen the team and get some additional resource, but that still leaves quite a tight programme. That's why we're bringing forward the sort of batching approach. So we'll do them in phases to try and expedite it as quickly as possible. Ultimately, if there were any delays, we could then stop at a certain point and not deliver them all, which isn't our intention, but that could reduce the risk. We have delivered previous phase of this, so we've learned through the process there that we can bring in to speed it up as much as possible.
I think the other thing I would say is that as the cabinet member responsible, if it came to pass that in the last period we had to adjust our resources balance to expedite a particular thing to avoid the loss of revenue to the city, that might be something that we could do, but it's not something we should probably be outrightly planning to do now, because as of this moment we have a plan that says we can do this. If some other act of God occurs, a sudden new general election, who knows? Hopefully that is not likely for a variety of reasons, exactly. Should that occur, then obviously all bets are off and we might have to think about it. But I think we should be able to find a way to navigate ourselves through this.
Thank you for that reassurance. I know it's difficult, and I understand the pressures, and the sort of all hands to the pumps thing is obviously a last resort if we need to, but I'm sure. And I suspect that you might find a new government will be more sympathetic to saying, your timescales have been a bit difficult, and an election, so they might be helpful, but we don't need to rely on that for obvious reasons. Just ask a couple of other questions. If I understand it correctly, the decision that we got from the government to go ahead with this was in December of 2023. We didn't actually have a report to the cabinet member to agree to go ahead with the process of start the process of getting the contract until March. Is there any particular reason why that took so long? And that was on the old process of using Oxford's model. So why did it take that long to get the decision to go ahead?
I honestly can't give you a good answer on that one, but I'm wondering whether an officer could give any perspective on that, although I do know that these things are not quick to put together.
Yep, we're obviously working to a usual timescale, and as you'll be aware, the EV team was slightly distracted during that time period, dealing with the other crisis that came up with the existing network. So that did cause a slight delay, but obviously we wanted to make sure it was right when we brought it forward, so brought it in March.
Thank you, Hayley. I should have been able to save you on that answer by remembering it myself, because I remember sitting through some of those discussions. Anything else?
I do have another. Yeah, it's not a question, it's more a comment, and I am now going to comment about the current situation. Obviously, I've been getting briefings from officers on a regular basis about the position regarding EV charging points. The last few that I had were quite interesting. I got one on March the 6th, which said that 33 charging points had been reinstated. On May the 20th, I got a note to say that 40 had been reinstated. And on July the 3rd, the EV bulletin, I think, was put out, and it said that 41 had been reinstated. I think what concerns me is the very slow pace at which SSE appear to be doing this. If you look at the period between March and July, they appear to have done 8 in 4 months. That's 2 a month. We have 98. We've done 41. If they carry on at the same rate, it'll take them 2 years to get all the charging points installed. It's disappointing that they don't appear to be willing to give us any sort of a time scale even an estimated time scale about getting this sorted. And it undermines confidence in the EV charging system if this is going to continue. I suspect we might even have new points up before these are actually all done and dusted if we carry on like this. It also appears to be disappointing that despite the fact that we made representations at quite high levels to do this, we still seem to be getting very slow, very, very slow progress in dealing with this. And the company appears not willing to come forward and explain to the public generally, and particularly to people outside what is going on. And I'm really also surprised that the local media haven't picked up on this, because it seems to me it's a pretty poor situation that we've got. This is continuing now since November. I would have expected by July we would have got this now solved, but we're still quite a way from getting it done. And I do think the company needs to get a move on, because it's very disappointing for electric car users who are still having to struggle to get to points in Portsmouth.
Councillor Majbik.
Basically, want to back what our learned gentleman down there has just said. We had this problem, didn't we, in the March meeting, was it? It was brought up, I think, March meeting, and it seemed very slow, less than 50% now. Why can't it be speeded up? Is it down to us not pushing them? Could you move your head just a little bit, sir? Is it down to us not pushing them enough, or is it that they're just not qualified to do it in time? Because it has taken a long, long time, hasn't it? And I know we brought it up before. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Hayley, I can see you've already reached for your microphone, so you are clearly anxious to speak at this moment.
Yeah, I think I would say that we are working in partnership with all parties involved, so the charge point operators and the DNO, SSEN. There are complex and differing issues, and we are all working together to overcome them as soon as possible. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily as quickly as anyone in this room would like.
Honestly, Hayley was far more diplomatic than I would be about it, because I have been extremely disappointed with the response of the organisations involved, and I think that many of the delays are, frankly, for unacceptable reasons. I will state for the record that I know that Hayley has been sent in on multiple occasions to ask for clarity about things, has been promised dates which have then not been delivered. We have started with being pleasant and cooperative. We have gone up through the gears a little bit in terms of our relationship. You know, we've now got the chief executive involved in contacting at a top-to-top level. But even after that, we are still not getting the level of responsiveness that I honestly would expect to be getting around these things. There are further complicating factors in terms of the fact we have a couple of different partners involved on the management of the charges directly, as well as the SSE link. So there are multiple parties involved, but I think it has been a bit of a horror show was the phrase I was going to use in terms of being able to pin this down and resolve it. It is a complicated issue. There have been technical issues that have involved going up to national institutes. There are legal implications involved in terms of responsibilities and contracts. But I think it has been a very disappointing episode. And I think the one upside from that is I think there have been some very good learnings that we can put in place for the new contracts that we are putting in place, and we will certainly we have certainly borne some of the scars of being a pioneer around this technology. Councillor Majbik.
Again, being in business all my life, being at the top of the tree all my life, I would not accept it. I would not accept what's happened. So I'm sorry, I'm going to back him 100%. Not blaming you at all, but I would not accept it from the partners. End of story. It's gone on far too long. Is there alternatives? Should there be alternatives, or is there no alternatives? But to me, in the situation, I don't know all the inside details that you know. I haven't got a clue. but I would have sacked them. I would have cancelled the contracts or whatever. I think they're in default, and I believed that by now we'd have had a lot more in. And as the boss down there, Graham, but as he said, it'll go on for years before we get it all finished. And at this rate, it's simply not good enough. It is not good enough, Chair. Thank you.
Any more comments? Graham?
Just to say thank you for your comments. I'm glad you share our concerns about this because it's gone on too long. And also, I want to reiterate that I don't have any criticism of our council officers who are working hard, and I feel really sorry for Hayley having to deal with this situation because it is difficult. But the companies have just got to stop messing about and get on with it.
Okay, if I come back to item 7 on the agenda, which was whether we are willing to accept the recommendations in the report. Noting the things that have been said as we have gone through this about the backdrop to it, I think we have to decide about where we go forward from here. We need to go forward quickly, and I think that the proposal on the table makes sense. So I'm going to accept the recommendation. Okay, last on the agenda, but by no means least, I'm sure, we have Portsmouth Park and Ride tender, where Paul Walker, please take the microphone. Take us away.
Thank you, Chair. This report asks you to approve the award of the new Park and Ride contract for Park and Ride Service 1 package of services, which we plan to commence at the beginning of September. At the meeting on the 20th of March, we sought approval to go through a procurement process, which we have now done. The proposal is to maintain the current level of service, which is every 15 minutes weekday, and also with a later start at the weekends and an early finish on Sundays. Tenderers were invited to submit bids for one, all or a combination of lot and sub-lot bidding options. These options varied in terms of service level, be that existing service level, reduced or enhanced service, vehicle type, be that Euro 6 diesel or electric buses, and service type, be that dedicated or non-dedicated or even a redirected service. We're proposing the contract starts on the 1st of September for a base period of 5 years with an option to extend for a further 3 years, up to a maximum of 8 years. And the option before you and recommended maintains the current level of service, which is around about 5% below the 2023 contract price and is around about 15% lower than the current interim contract price that was approved back in March. The buses used will not be new, they'll be less than 2 years old on the first day of service. And as part of the overall Park and Ride refresh, it's proposed that the buses will be branded in a new Park and Ride livery developed in partnership between the City Council and the preferred tenderer. We have considered electrification. That isn't economically advantageous to the council at this stage. There is an ability in the contract to migrate towards that, and obviously with 62 electric motors already running around the city with one operator is obviously the way that the industry is going. We're working on various bids with both operators, both main operators in the city, to electrify their fleet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillors?
100% support it, no problems.
Supportive. I do have a question. Paragraph 6.5 and 6.6, it talks about not progressing option 1B because it's reduced service and although it's cheaper on fuel, it's less efficient. Then the following paragraph says the procurement process is allowed for a move entirely or partially to this option over the term of the contract. So are we proposing possibility to go to that at some point? I was a little confused.
Yeah, it's just the way the contract's set out at the moment. So we can migrate to that. If we go to that direct on day one, we are paying the electric cost, but receiving diesel buses for the first year because that's how long it'll probably take for them to get them to bring into service under the terms of the contract. So what we can do is that when we get to the break clauses in the contract, we can invoke the electrification clause.
Going to follow, depending on that answer, I was going to follow up. The other question is how easy is us to expand the Park and Ride service should we wish to do so, and should there be demand for it?
So if I answer that one a little bit from what I have seen and where I'm kind of pushing it in the short run. And I will certainly give officers a chance to amplify my answer if I miss something. So I think expanding the system is very difficult at the moment because we've actually faced demand reduction and the service is, costing money. I think the desire to expand it is definitely there, but it's kind of on a step-by-step basis. So I view this as hopefully a first step in a relaunch of the service to generate demand, establish the credibility and the attractiveness of the service in a first way, and then come back at a later date to see whether there is more that we can do. The objective of a park and ride in taking vehicles off the road before they even reach into our city, I think is a very worthy one. And we've got a great asset base to be doing something there, but we don't yet have even the basic service operating as we want. So I think the measures that are being proposed at the moment to relaunch it, get it going, build some momentum, are what we should do first, but we should be looking to see what we can do to either directly add to it or see what other things could connect to it to make it overall a more impactful service. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And what we're going to be doing as part of the rebrand and refresh of the service is make the buses stand out a little bit more, show where the buses, have on the buses where the bus goes, how much it costs, how frequent it is, to make it more attractive to people. We're going to be doing things to make the site more attractive, to make it slightly more user-friendly, so pay on bus rather than pay at car park meter. And then within the contract itself, there's an ability for a rate per bus per day if we want to expand it to do other things. So if you want to implement event day park and ride, if you want to do seasonal park and rides, Christmas park and rides, or if you want to extend it to other locations, there's a rate within that to enable it as part of the overall package.
I certainly agree that trying to make it more attractive and more people more aware of it, because it could be the case that using the park and ride might be more efficient rather than sitting in a queue getting out of a car park, or say in Gunwharf maybe if there's big queues and that. But that goes back to something I said earlier. I don't think you were here when we talked about it, but it was the parking strategy, and I said that the parking strategy has got to really think about how we incentivise or maybe disincentivise people to park in the city. It's not obviously totally in our control because not all car parks are controlled by the City Council, but I think that's got to be part of it, because people will use the park and ride if it's more difficult and more expensive to park in the city, and that would help our congestion. So I think there are some challenging questions that have to be asked about how we're going to do that, how we support businesses but also have a park and ride system that facilitates people coming in when they need to. So I think that's the thing that we maybe need to start thinking about.
Yes, I would concur with the direction of your thinking behind that, and we'll see how that kind of space evolves. Anything else? No. Once again, I'm happy to accept the recommendation as it sits, and unless anyone has any other business, I am going to declare this meeting closed after thanking everyone for their constructive contributions and for being nice to me the first time I am sitting in this chair.